Welcome back to the Flaky Foodie podcast. Today we have Timothy Bristol with us. He's the owner of the Melting Truck in Connecticut. So I'm looking forward to having you on the show and let's talk about some great food.
All right, that sounds fun.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your food truck.
So the Melting Truck is a gourmet grilled cheese food truck. We started in January 2021,
Okay.
right in the middle of the pandemic.
How has that
Uh,
been?
it's been okay. I think food trucks have benefited from the pandemic because they are so mobile,
Yes.
and it's not like a sit-down restaurant where you have to have all these COVID restrictions. Like, of course, we have people, if they wait in line, 6 feet and they had to wear a mask and all that, but it wasn't it wasn't really a hindrance on the business unless we were at like events that don't happen because of COVID. Like food truck festivals happened a lot
Yeah.
less. But you get booked for private events, you get booked for farmers markets. So it was a learning experience to be sure, but I don't think it would have been a more difficult year or it would have been an easier year had COVID not happened. I think it would have been about the same for us. Um, but the food truck itself, like I said, gourmet grilled cheese. We do soups, we do mac and cheese, we do, whatever we can think up that involves cheese.
So what's kind of the best seller or the fan favorite?
We got a couple of fan favorites. The first one, and this kind of took me by surprise because I just sort of like thought it up and put it together. It's called the Pickle Melt,
Mm,
and it's a grilled cheese with just cheddar cheese and bread and butter pickles, and people love it.
very interesting. Well, yeah, you
Yeah,
have like a little bit of sweet and acidity with the cheese.
yeah.
So I can see that working.
uh, People love adding bacon to it. That's
Ah, okay,
yeah.
yeah. I can see that with the
Um,
bit of the salty too.
our other big seller is something we call the Extreme Melt. Uh,
Okay.
it's a it's a regular grilled cheese. We call our classic grilled cheese, which is American and cheddar, and then we add a cheddar cheese crust on one side of the grilled cheese.
Now that's you speaking my language.
Now I'm trying to think of any other like in the summer we do like a barbecue pork grilled cheese. That's really popular in the summer, but I can only do it when it's warm enough to turn on the smoker that I have.
Yeah, I can see that. So are there any like interesting combinations? Like what's your oddest grilled cheese combination that's on the
Our
menu or that
oddest
you
grilled
ever had
cheese.
on the menu?
So this is one that I didn't think once again was going to sell well, and it was suggested to me by another vendor at a farmer's market that we were doing. He sold spicy jams and
Mm,
barbecue sauces, and he gave us a sample of it was a raspberry chipotle jam,
hmm.
and he told us to put it with sharp cheddar cheese and it would be delicious, and he was correct.
Oh,
And I did not think that people were gonna like it, but it sells pretty good. Like whenever we have the jam, we do it, and it's always been like popular at like markets and stuff like that. It's not for
mhm.
every crowd, but it's delicious. It's one of my favorite sandwiches,
it
and
it
I
would
didn't
be
think it
for the
would
me
be.
crowd.
Yeah.
I I love sweet and spicy together. There's something about that combination. Uh, I did an episode on food trends, and one of the ones that didn't make it was like on the cutting room floor was swicy, is what they called it.
Spicy. Okay.
Yeah, but we're in April and I haven't heard heads or tails of swicy, so I don't think it caught on.
I'm trying to think if there are any like really unusual grilled cheeses that we do that I didn't think would sell well and they do. I mean, we do like the typical stuff, like we do tomato mozzarella and pesto. We do a chicken Philly grilled cheese.
Mhm.
Oh, and this is more of a like a dessert sandwich, and it's not
Mhm.
technically a grilled cheese, but um, my wife came up with an idea for a s'mores grilled cheese
Mm.
that is chocolate sauce, marshmallow fluff, and graham cracker crumbs between the bread, and you toast it like a grilled cheese. It's
Mm.
delicious.
And that's vegetarian too. Marshmallow fluff is vegetarian. It doesn't have gelatin like your standard marshmallow. So
Yeah.
Yes, even I can partake, and
Well, we
that
try to
sounds
keep our
delicious.
options open with like vegetarian stuff, and we have a bunch of grilled cheeses that are vegetarian. Unfortunately, it's almost impossible for us to do like gluten-free stuff
Yeah.
or vegan, just because of the way that the truck operates. Like the grill is constantly covered in bacon grease. So
Mm,
like if if someone was like strictly vegan and or strictly gluten free because of like they're intolerant, they have an intolerance of wheat or flour, like I can't really do anything about that
mm.
because there's always like bread on the truck and it's touching every surface, like unfortunately. um but we do have a bunch of vegetarian grilled cheeses, and and a lot of people come to us because of that. Like they're always asking for vegetarian options.
Awesome. So why a food truck? How did that idea kind of come to be, and walk me through the steps of making it happen?
Okay. I'll preface this by saying that I would never do it again.
Mm.
But so a friend of mine and my partner in the food truck, Mike Young, he came to me one day and he knew that I worked in the restaurant industry and was looking to put together a food truck. I previously worked at a few Italian restaurants. I was on the Food Network once.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, for one of the Restaurant Impossible.
Really?
Yeah, I was on the episode is called Stella's Italian Restaurant.
Stella's Italian restaurant. I probably have seen that. I used to watch a lot, quite a bit of Restaurant Impossible. I have to check it out.
um, I was at the very end of the episode. I was one of the line cooks
Mm.
in the last like 5 minutes or so, and I wasn't supposed to be. Like that's a different crazy story. But uh, after doing that, I worked at a couple of other Italian restaurants, and I worked on food trucks for other people for a couple of years. Like I worked on a lobster truck, I worked on a different grilled cheese truck,
Mm.
and I worked for a French fry food truck.
Okay.
And so I had the food truck experience, and I was looking to put together a food truck, but I just didn't have the money.
Mm.
They're expensive.
Yeah.
And my friend, he was like, "Well, if you run the food truck, I'll put up the money for it, and we'll be partners." And we did that. And my wife jumped on board because she's an accountant, so she does our books,
Hmm.
which is very important and not something that every food truck has. Like a
Yes.
lot of independent restaurant owners and food trucks don't have proper accounting, and it's absolutely necessary.
Yes. Or else you end up on Restaurant Impossible.
So we formed the actual business in the summer of 2020, and we went and got ourselves a used food truck around September 2020. We bought it in Maryland and have it drive it all the way back to Connecticut, which was its own nightmare.
Mm.
Um, the food truck doesn't go very fast on the highway; like it tops out at 60. So there were a lot of angry people behind me for several states.
Oh, wow.
And so we got it back. It used to be an Italian street food truck,
Hmm.
but it had all the equipment that we needed. Like all we really need is a flat top, and a set of burners and some coolers. And so it had all that stuff, and it was relatively cheap. But what we didn't know and what we were very experienced at is that making sure that everything was in working condition. And most of the equipment, except for the grill itself, was not.
Hmm.
Um, we spent a bunch of money either upgrading stuff or repairing the truck.
Hmm.
One thing in particular we didn't know about was that the frame of the truck had a huge hole in it,
Oh,
like it was
wow.
rotted away. So we had to go and have it repaired and have the frame reinforced,
Hmm.
which was not a cost we expected. We had to redo the propane systems, the plumbing systems, the electrical systems, because whoever had put the truck together was out of their mind.
Mm.
And once we got all that up and running, it was like I said, January 2021 by the time we were actually able to operate. And there was a whole different learning curve then. It was learning about all the regulations that you have to deal with as a food truck. Where can you park? How do you get customers? All that stuff. Um, we eventually got ourselves signed up to, do farmers markets, do private events, stuff like that. But there was a lot of, even though I had food truck experience, there was a lot of stuff I didn't anticipate.
From
And
being
some
on
of it
the
was,
owner side, it's a little different.
yeah.
Yeah.
And some of it's small stuff, like where do you get propane?
Hmm.
And I called around to a bunch of different like fuel companies, and everyone's like, no, we can't do food trucks, they're a liability.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
I learned that nobody wants to work, like professional tradespeople don't want to work on food trucks because they're a liability.
Hmm.
And so like literally we had to do a lot of work on the food truck ourselves, or if we had friends who knew certain trades, we could use them. But professional tradespeople generally don't want to work on food trucks.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, and then it was just learning like what vendors do we want to use. We got a really cool uh, vendor for like our drinks and chips.
Cool.
All Joe's Tea. They're pretty awesome.
Oh, wow. And it's peach too.
Yeah, peach, delicious.
Yes, it
Um,
looks delicious.
we found a local bakery that would supply all of our bread, and like
Oh,
a lot of
nice.
a lot of the grilled cheese is having the right bread.
It is. I agree wholeheartedly.
So we picked out two kinds of breads. We have a sourdough bread and a whole wheat bread
Mm.
that are they're wide slices
Mhm.
and they're like 3/4 of an inch thick. So these are big grilled cheeses. And then we just went, we had a tasting. We figured out what do we want to serve. We got a bunch of our friends together and found out what they liked, and then we just went from that.
Mm. So why you worked in Italian food, it sounds like. You worked in a lot of different areas. Why did you choose grilled cheese for your food truck?
So I wanted something that I could have a lot of creativity with, and
Mhm.
something that provided for variety. Because what I like to do is have sort of a rotating menu on the truck, where if you come to the truck at two different things, you'll have two different menus
Mm.
almost that you can choose from. You can try something different every time you go. And I think that's a lot of the appeal of grilled cheeses. You can really make it what you want.
Yeah, it's a blank canvas.
Yeah.
Different cheeses, different breads, different other add-ons and fillings.
Well, and that's one of the things I like is that people can do whatever they want on add-ons. It's sort of a build your own sandwich thing at some point. Like we have our standard menu items on there and we have specials. But then below that, there's just a menu of add-ons you can put onto the grilled cheese. Everything from like onions to jalapenos, avocado,
Mm.
bacon, chicken, like really whatever you want. And the customers really like it because then they can. I find out that like people have very specific tastes about grilled cheese and they're not all the same.
Yes. So what's your favorite combination that you've put together?
Um, well, one, I'm amazed that I'm not sick of grilled cheese at this point. Uh, but my favorite, it's either the raspberry chipotle jam and cheddar cheese with bacon,
Mm.
or I do like me like a standard like just cheddar American and tomato and avocado. I like that
Oh,
too.
that's a good combination.
Yeah. Like if I'm in the mood for like a just a bring you back to your childhood grilled cheese, that's what it is.
Yes. Tomato is one of the best additions in my opinion.
Yeah.
So those of you listening today, I want to know what do you add to your grilled cheese because I'm very curious to know some of the combinations.
I found out in asking people because I asked people on like other podcasts and whatnot, like, oh, what do you put in your grilled cheese? And people are like, wait, you can put more than cheese in there?
Yeah, I actually asked on my social media, when does a grilled cheese stop being a grilled cheese? Because at the time of recording, National Grilled Cheese Day was like a couple of days ago, and I was like, I want a sandwich. I just want today, normally a standard grilled cheese is all right in my book, but I was
Hmm.
craving something a little more, so I had a sandwich that had everything and cheese on it, and so I was like, is this a melt or is it a grilled cheese? Am I cheating by posting this? But it was so good, I didn't care.
Yeah, we blur the line sometimes. Like
Yeah,
sometimes we'll have burgers and we'll do like patty melts and stuff like that.
yeah,
And we do a chicken Philly melt it's a chicken and cheese grilled cheese, but like, it's really, there's no it's fine.
yes.
We encompass a lot of different kinds of sandwiches.
Cool. That's awesome. So tell me a little bit. We're going to go back a little bit. Tell me about kind of your cooking background. You said you worked in an Italian eatery before. Um, you have any stories to share from your background?
Sure. My first job at a restaurant was a Chinese delivery guy. I was a Chinese delivery guy. That was my first job. I worked there for, God, a long time. Eventually, they showed me how to cook some of the food, which was awesome.
No, that's
Um, I worked my way up to like doing the fryers and stuff like that. And another restaurant that was in the same plaza as the Chinese restaurant I worked at was Stella's Italian restaurant, and that was where the Restaurant Impossible show happened. I was originally supposed to be a bar back. Like I was a delivery guy for them. They let me like cook in the they taught me how to make the pizza and stuff like that, but I wasn't really like a cook. And when the Restaurant Impossible came, unfortunately none of the chefs knew, well, most of the chefs didn't know fluent English. And the the show had trouble teaching them the menu they were supposed to do.
Mm,
So literally 10 minutes before they were supposed to do the final dinner service, they pulled me aside and said, "Hey, we need you to do hot and cold apps. Here's the
mm,
pictures. Here's how you're
mhm,
supposed to do it. Go do." So I got a crash course on how to make the hot and cold apps, and they just put me on the line.
mm.
And Robert Irvine was in the service window yelling at me the entire time.
Oh wow.
he I was making salads and whatnot, and like I guess I gave him one too many salads that weren't plated correctly, and he was like, "If you don't make a salad right, I'm just gonna come back there and beat you up."
Oh
And I was like,
wow.
"Oh my god." Um,
Was it one of those things where the camera yelled cut and then he was just like, "Oh, good job. I shook your hand." It was okay. So he
nah,
was okay.
he didn't care about the camera cutting at all.
Oh wow. So he's
I mean,
that intense when the cameras goes off
oh
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He actually is that intense. He was that intense the entire time until after the dinner service, and then he was
Mm,
all handshakes and pats on the back.
mm,
But while the show was in production and all that, he was 100% business,
mm.
to the point where he yelled at the owners like off camera.
Oh my goodness.
We were all sitting down after he had done like the tasting of the food and everything,
Hmm.
and the one of the owners was like, "Our food's not that bad, is it?" And he was like, "I would never eat here, ever."
Oh wow.
He's like, "But don't you worry about that. That's my problem now. I'm gonna fix it." But he yelled at
Wow.
the kitchen staff off camera because they were talking shit about him when they had hot mics.
Oh my goodness.
He was like, "I don't have to be here. I'm doing this for you." And a lot of the guys in the kitchen were full of themselves. Like the head chef, Jerry, he was very full of himself.
Mm,
And you can see it in the show. Like he liked joking around and talking about that, how he could cook real good and all that. And he's a pretty good cook. Um, but yeah, the chefs were like talking shit about him, and he brought them all in the back and was like, don't do that. I'm not here for that."
mm.
But it was an interesting show. Like the whole production of it was very uh interesting to learn, because it does actually, for the most part, take place in the time frame they say it does.
Okay.
And
You always wonder if there's a little studio magic behind that, but that's interesting to know.
there's only a little.
Hmm.
The whole rebuild of the restaurant took place in the time frame they said it did, but I think the owners and the production crew sort of had pre-designed what was going to happen, but it took place in the time frame they say it is. Like there's a little bit of like pre-production, but that's it.
Hmm. Did
And
it?
I, huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. You can go ahead. I
Oh,
didn't
it's
mean to
okay.
interrupt. I was going to ask, does anybody recognize you from the show? Have you ever had any situations like that before?
No, I don't think I was on it long enough for people to be like, "Hey, you're the guy from the show." The only people who know about it are the people I've told about it. I think
Mm,
like no one's come up to me. If people come up to me now, they recognize me from the food truck.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
tell me about kind of your period in food trucks after Stella's Italian restaurant. Kind of what was your trajectory towards opening your food truck?
so the food trucks I had worked on, the first job I got on a food truck was on a truck called the Freiburg food truck,
Mm.
and they did French.
Freiburg, like
Yeah,
cyborg.
yeah.
Cool, cool name. I like it.
It was the guys on it were pretty fun. Unfortunately, like making tons and tons of French fries is just grueling. Like the
Yeah.
process to make French fries is just very labor intensive. And I only worked there for about a month or so before I was like, this making French fries is not for me.
Mm.
But it was a good learning experience because I got to learn about what it's like to work on a food truck. I got to know what it's like to drive a food truck
Mhm.
because it is not fun at all to drive a food truck. They are heavy,
Mm.
sometimes unbalanced, and you
Mm.
can't turn very quickly.
I was just about to ask how the turning is.
The turning is atrocious, and if you get a good gust of wind, you feel it.
Mm.
The entire time driving back from Maryland, like it was a windy day, and the
Oh,
truck was just being pushed off. And I'd only driven a food truck for a few miles before that, so I got the full experience when it took me 11 hours to get from Maryland to Connecticut.
oh wow. So don't take your food truck cross country, folks.
um, but yeah, the so I learned a lot about like how food trucks operate
Mhm.
and what the day to day is for at least a French fry food truck and how many pounds of potato they go through. It's insane. After I left that, a friend of mine knew a guy who just retrofitted a one of those like small commuter buses, like maybe a 20 passenger bus,
Mhm.
into a lobster truck.
Hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, he was looking for help for the summer. The lobster truck is going to be parked at a brewery for the summer, so it's not like it's going anywhere. I wouldn't have to drive it, which is fantastic." And he was like, "He needs help." And I told him, "You got experience." So I worked on the lobster truck for 2 summers. I
Hmm.
mean, as long as they were busy. Like the first time was like early summer to late fall, and then the second time was like late spring to early fall, and that was a unique experience because learning how to deal with large crowds at a brewery
Hmm.
is like essential to owning a food truck. If you're going to do that, like you're going to do breweries, you're going to do large crowds, and the lobster truck is like the easiest thing, because lobster rolls take like 3 minutes to make.
Mm.
So you could pump out a lot of volume, and you only need like one or two people. The problem there is that lobster is so expensive.
Mm.
You really have to watch food costs, and that's the problem they ran into. Is that either portioning wasn't happening correctly, or they were being misinformed about how much lobster they were getting, because they would buy frozen packs of lobster, like lobster claw and like shredded lobster meat,
Mhm.
and uh, part of the packaging was it was water because it was frozen. So every
Mm.
time they opened a pack of lobster, there'd be about in a 2 pound bag there'd be about 4 ounces of water.
Mm,
And the owner was like, why am I losing so much money in lobster? Like, why aren't we selling that much?
mm,
And I explained to him, I was like, it's not all lobster that's in there. There's water that's in there too. And you're not taking that into account in your food cost. And
mm,
once he did, he realized that he was selling almost exactly what he was supposed to sell.
mm,
Um, but yeah, that was interesting. A funny story from that truck. One day, it was like a regular like Wednesday afternoon or something like that, and I was just sitting there. It wasn't too busy. All of a sudden, like 50
mm.
people show up, and I'm by
Oh
myself.
wow.
I don't have enough lobster like prepped
Oh
to
man.
serve all these people at once. So I immediately threw a ton of lobster into the hot water, and I was like, "Oh my god!" What happened was is there was like a party bus or a tour bus that came through, stopped at the
Mm.
brewery, didn't tell anyone,
Oh wow.
and they all wanted food because they had to leave in half an hour.
Oh my gosh. Pressure.
And yeah, so I like worked my ass off to feed as many of them as humanly possible before they had to leave. And
Oh.
it was just crazy. I was the only person, and like the other person who was the manager was like half an hour away. And I called her and I was like, there's like 100 people here and it's just me. She's like, I'll be there as soon as I can.
Mm,
But they had to leave.
hmm.
So most of them got their food. Most of them, but
So it was
a
just, was there any other variety other than like a lobster roll?
we had lobster rolls, we had crab rolls, which was like Maryland crab,
Hmm.
and well, it's all Connecticut style stuff. So it's like the lobster rolls is just the lobster and butter,
Hmm.
and the crab roll is basically the same thing. And we had clam chowder and lobster bisque. So the people that couldn't get crab rolls at the end, they just got soup because I ran out of lobster at that point. Like there was no other lobster that was going to be ready in the amount of time.
I was just wondering how complicated things are if you had like fries or a side or something to put together
Oh
too.
no, there wasn't a it was just the truck was laid out kind of like there was just a big flat top grill to grill the buns and stuff like that, heat up the lobster. Then next to that was a big steam table where you hold the lobster,
Hmm.
and it had a fridge and some sinks. They didn't have the capability to do French fries or anything like that. But it was like still like if you multiply the 3 minutes it takes to make a lobster roll by 40, 50 people, there's no way you
Hmm.
can serve all that people in half an hour with one person. And let's see, after that, or actually in the middle of that, I worked for this other grilled cheese truck. And that was the worst experience I'd ever had on a
Oh
food truck.
wow.
I I
I'm
only worked
surprised you opened a grilled cheese truck after
well, I
after that
basically told
experience.
myself that I'm not going to do anything that this guy did. Um, he was not a nice person,
Mm,
and I was doing him a favor by working on his truck because he was short
mm,
staffed, and he just treated me like I knew the menu front to back, and I didn't.
mm,
He had me do like prep for stuff. He had way too many sandwiches on the menu to accommodate being quick,
mm.
and it was just not. I took away from that experience that I would never be that guy. Only because I would never want to treat an employee that way, and I would never have a menu that's so overcrowded with food that I couldn't get anything out quickly. And that was my food truck experience before I bought one.
Very cool. So, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing kind of your story and more about the melting truck. So, if someone is in the Connecticut area, where can they find your truck?
So right now our schedule is in a little bit of a flux, but you can find us if you're in the Connecticut area and you're in like Fairfield County. You can find us starting in the month of May every Thursday afternoon at the Trumbull Farmers Market. You can find us hopefully doing street vending in Stratford starting in the month of May as well. On hopefully, I think we're going to do Wednesdays and Fridays, and it's all on our website. I update it all the time about where we're going to be. Right now, if someone was going to be in Connecticut on Saturday, let's say we're going to be at the Athletic Brewing Company from 12 to 4.
Okay. And so
And
what's your website?
my website is themeltingtruck.com.
Very simple,
Yep.
themeltingtruck.com. And you're the
If
melting truck on all social media platforms as well.
I think so. I think
Cool.
our Instagram is at Melting Truck, and our Facebook.com/the Melting Truck, and our email, if anyone wants to email me about like local Connecticut private events, it's meltingfoodtruck@gmail.com.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really learned a lot, especially about Restaurant Impossible. Now I'm definitely going to go rewatch the episode because I feel like I've seen it before, but I just want to make sure it's the one I remember. So
I recently rewatched it just to
yeah,
see like how well it aged,
yeah.
and it's somewhere in season 6.
Somewhere in season 6.
Somewhere in season
Okay.
6.
Season 6, Restaurant Impossible. And if I come to Connecticut, I want a sandwich with raspberry chipotle jam.
Oh, it's delicious. It's
That
delicious.
sounds amazing. Well, I have been the Flaky Foodie, and you can find me on all social media platforms. The Flaky Foodie, TheFlakyFoodie. And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, treat it like gossip or the gospel and tell somebody about it. And if you eat something delicious this week, be sure to tell me on all my social media platforms. Have a great week, everybody.